I will now hand over to Estelle Hutchinson from Your Sunset, talking about, is this a good time to talk about grief? Thank you, Estella.
Thank you so much, Marie. It's lovely to be with you here today, Alan, and all the people watching the video back. So today I am going to be talking about grief and the impact of grief at this time of year coming into Christmas and the new year. So I'll just share my slides for you now as well. There we go. And I usually like to start with a little bit about myself so people know who is talking to them. And this is me looking very fancy. This was a media photo shoot, so it's amazing how good they can make you look these days. And I'm a grief counsellor and an end-of-life doula. People ask sort of, how did you get into this sort of thing? So in my mid-20s, my partner was killed in a motorcycle accident, and that was my first introduction to death and funerals and all the things that go with that. I spent 7 years volunteering in palliative care. I lived in Melbourne at that time. I've always been quite empathetic, and I have the clear head in a crisis. So I'm based here in Canberra on Ngunnawal lands as well. So that's a little bit about me. And what we're going to cover today is we're going to be looking at grief in the festive season, basically, and how the festive season can sort of impact our grief. We're going to have a quick look at a grief theory model, which is known as continuing bonds. Then we'll look at how we can set some boundaries for others in our lives, ways we can honour our lost person or pet or whatever it is that you've lost, and some strategies to keep ourselves safe sort of during this time of year as well.
Okay.
So let's have a think about why is Christmas hard, or Christmas and the New Year, whatever beliefs you have, even if you don't do Christmas. Quite often, December, January has its own sort of a set of things that make us start reflecting on the year we had or the year we want to have. And if you're grieving as well, whether it's the first Christmas without your person or the seventh, it can be challenging to carry your loss while everyone around you is kind of celebrating. You might be getting lots of invitations to things. You might not be getting any invitations to things because people aren't sure if you would want to come. We can sometimes feel forgotten. You might feel that your person's been forgotten
Can
as
I
well.
just say something there? I spent a lot of time in isolated mining towns, and usually around Christmas is a high suicide rate,
Yes.
especially with single people. And I know me and a friend used to have an open house that's not had nothing to do with the company to anyone that would didn't want to mix with anyone, just to get out of the place or play music, drink alcohol, feed, watch blue movies, whatever, just to help relax and get it, just get away from everyone. We probably had 2 or 3 dozen people, and at least it kept them safe for Christmas Day. But and it didn't matter what their religious beliefs were or whatever. But yeah, but that was because we got sick of seeing so many people kill themselves on Christmas Day.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think quite often just that pressure of, thinking that everybody else around you's got their family with them, or they've got something with them, or, it kind of highlights what you don't have with you. So putting in place the things that we need to make you safe. And I think that's fabulous, Alan. I
But
like that idea. And, people
in
can
the
come
But
when
in
they want.
the
Yeah.
bad old days, if you're looking for work in the mines, you always apply about a month before Christmas because there's a lot of people leaving just around that time.
Mm.
So, and yeah, a lot of people say it average about 6 months in the early days, late 60s, early 70s. That's in
Yeah.
the Pilbara area anyway.
Yeah.
Kalgoorlie was more permanent. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. So the other things that make this time of year a bit hard is feeling like you've got to put on a brave face for the family. This can also take a lot of energy if you're putting on a brave face for the grandchildren as well, and you may have recently lost your partner. And depending on how recent the loss is, for some people, this can be the first time that they're around a big group of family since the funeral as well. And we don't always sort of think about that. But the main reason that it's hard is that you're grieving, and that is not something that is a quick process. It's part of our life from here on. I thought we'd have a look at the difference between grief and mourning, because people sometimes get these concepts a bit confused. So grief is the constellation of internal thoughts and feelings we have when someone we love's died, whereas grief's the internal meaning given to the experience of loss. And
Mourning is wearing black, yeah.
Yeah, mourning's when you take that grief and you have taking that grief on the inside and expressing it outside of yourself. So mourning's the outward expression of grief. And over the last 150 years, our culture's kind of taken away our opportunity to do that. You know, in Victorian times, you wore mourning wear. You know, there were different indicators. So people around you knew that you were in mourning, whereas now we don't want to have those conversations. We tuck people away, and that increases the experience of isolation. And
black curtains, black armbands, half-mast flags. They still carry on a little bit.
Yeah, there's a little bit there. They're usually, pretty quick little signs, whereas, you know, some of the Victorian mourning and even, you know, in the Greek Orthodox tradition, you know, if your husband died, the wife wore black for the rest of her life, things like that, you know, are interesting, like from a evolutionary sort of point of view as well.
Very true, Estella. In my culture, we mourn for 100 nights. So they used to wear black. Anyone who was mourning would wear black as a symbol. And 100 nights, they would wear that. They could grow their hair just to symbolize it's all the outward expression of grief. But nowadays, because it's a little bit inconvenient, you know, to be constantly wearing black. So they just have now either a black armband or a black ribbon, which they just they no longer wear black. Maybe they have uniforms that they wear to work or whatever it is, but they black, and now slowly phasing, and people just have a wake, and that's it.
Yes.
Done.
Yeah. So one of the grief theories that I work with people a lot is called continuing bonds. And this is a theory that when someone dies, our relationship with them doesn't end. It just slowly changes over time. So the bond can remain just as strong. And, you know, depending on the activities or the rituals around a person can help to establish and maintain the development of these bonds. So this particular theory came about in the mid-90s, and it's about as far away as you can get from Freud's sort of original concept around needing to sever bonds, and once a person's died, your work is to get over that and move on. So, you know, continuing bonds is much more realistic. And I still find with a lot of clients that I have now that they're caught up in this I need to get over it thing, when it's like, no, you don't. That person was an important part of your life. And while they may not physically be present in your life now, you can continue to have your relationship. It just looks very different as well. So when it comes to Christmas and New Year, we want to have a think about what this time of year actually means to you. So, you know, whether you've got a strong religious faith part of that. Is it the time of year that you get to see extended family? Does it mean holidays? Did it used to mean holidays if you're not working anymore as well? That can also be a factor that it would have changed over time.
Hold on, I've just got a phone call. Hello, Alan.
Would you like to pause for a moment, Marie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other side is also considering what this time of year meant to your person. So, there's some people who go totally Christmas crazy, and that might make their loss even more pronounced as well. But also, where there's a regular family ritual, perhaps that person might have had a particular job. So, for example, my mum's job in the extended family get together is bringing the pavlova. So, who's going to bring the pavlova? And this might sound like a bit of a generalization, but quite often dads are in charge of the barbecue as well. So who's going to cook the prawns properly? Because it certainly won't be me. I mess those up every time. But also, what were their roles? Who's going to do that? How can we sort of honor the role that they had? And also considering where things are for you this year. Like, particularly in early grief, we often get caught up in the expectation that it's going to be a hard day or that it's going to be upsetting. And sometimes it's just not. So, also sort of thinking about that for yourself. So, setting boundaries, probably one of the most important things. And that starts with considering what, your limits are. And, after you've had to think about what is this time of year to you and what you think it might bring forward for you, is then you can sort of set those boundaries. So I always like to be clear and firm with boundary setting as well. It can be hard if you've got people in your family who are like, oh, don't be stupid, just come along. But, you want to be quite clear on that, but also leaving room to change your mind. So some of the things that have often worked for clients of mine is sort of setting a time limit. I'd love to come, but I'm only going to be able to stay for a little while. So you've set that expectation ahead of time, but if you're having a good time, you can still stay on. And of course, thank you so much for the invitation, but I'm just not up to it this year. And quite often people will acknowledge that and say, if you change your mind, feel free to pop in anyway. So, the main things there are thinking about what you think you might need and making sure the people around you know that as well. And the other one is, if you need to reach out, is, thinking about those people who will be there for you so that you've got that opportunity to reach out as well. And there's lots of different ways to include our person in the festivities. So setting their place at the table. I've had clients who still set a full plate and a seat for their person. They might have a photo of them there as well.
Yeah.
And, it can be as big or as little as you like. So making their favorite food, doing a toast over their favorite drink, a personal favorite of mine. And, when you're eating that food or drinking that drink, being mindful and thinking and reflecting about them and the memories that were made in the past around those foods. So, my partner who I mentioned earlier, his drink was bourbon. So every time there's a bourbon drunk, we think about all the bourbons we used to drink in our 20s as well. And, he was quite a bit older than me, and he would be very proud that, I've moved on from cheap bourbon to high quality bourbons now, So again, that extends the relationship. We sometimes, people might fill their person's stocking with gifts and give them to charity. And I know quite a lot of people, particularly people who have lost their children, not necessarily as young children, but even as young adults. They might donate the amount of money that they would have spent on their present to a charity that was important to that person as well. When we also can, if it's a more recent bereavement, there might be the giving of gifts of their belongings. So the Christmas after my grandmother died, she had pre-labeled a few things and worded up my mum and my aunt that these were the gifts for the grandchildren the following Christmas. We can, of course, have our moment of silence before the meal, having each person share a memory of their person, lighting a candle. And my other personal favorite is giving yourself a gift you think they may have given you as well. And, giving yourself permission to spoil yourself.
There's also changing the flowers, washing the headstone, spending a bit of time talking. But I do that regularly anyway. But on that particular day, normally it's just a Sunday.
Yes. And where you already have a gravestone or another memorial, like making that visit. So the extra visits as well are always great. I want to talk about, keeping ourselves safe. So that's, again, acknowledging that you have the right to mourn and give yourself permission to take the space that you need. And, thinking about the people that you can reach out to, who you can be honest about how you're feeling and not having to put on that brave face for the festivities as well. Quite often, friends who have been through a similar loss are the best thing at this time as well. I always suggest limiting our alcohol intake or sort of minimizing any sort of negative coping mechanisms that might put us at risk as well. And, Alan, you've touched on, the supports that you've offered previously in your work in the mines as well.
We didn't limit alcohol then.
It can be either way, but, you put in place another safety measure for them, that they could be around other people while they're...
No one drives, everyone's kept in a safe place,
Yeah, absolutely. And, reaching out for help if you need it as well. Lifeline routinely put on extra staff through this period as well. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You did help a fair bit. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Take care.